Forever. Two men sat either side of a mahogany desk. I sympathize, I do. But you did sign the contract, Mr. Kardash, said Dr. Hargreaves, late 50s, wine red nose. Dang the contract. What if something goes wrong in there? Interrupted David Carter, early 30s, pale and dying. Calm down, please, Mr. Carter, Dr. Hargreaves went on. We have perfected this treatment. It's been tested on all kinds of subjects. Animals, insects, even plants, and each time it was 100% successful. But never people, right? Never actually people? You never sent a human being in there, have you? Dr. Hargreaves took off his glasses, polished them on his tie and then set them back on his nose. Mr. Carter, David. David, you are dying of a brain tumor, a tragedy at any age, but more so for a man so young. You signed up for this treatment because you knew it to be the only, literally, the only way to save your life. I know, David looked downwards. The whole idea of it terrifies me though. If I can be frank, David, said Dr. Hargreaves leaning forward, fingers interlaced. What have you got to lose? The next day David awoke in his room to the sound of voices outside in the corridor. Is definitely up. I heard Willoughby on the phone with them about half an hour ago. That sounded like Nurse Jennifer. What did he say? Did you catch anything? And that would be Tony, the morning cleaner. Not a lot, but he was off on one, screaming down the phone. I think it was one of the guys over at research. Hargreaves wasn't happy at all, something about a virus. That doesn't sound very comforting. Tony remarked. Still, they're nothing to do with us, are they? Dunno, replied Nurse Jennifer. Anyway, I'll see ya. The door to David's room opened and Nurse Jennifer came in carrying a tray with his pills. Morning, David, she said cheerfully, last lot of these for a while, I should think. Hope so, yeah, said David. He was even more worried now. An hour later, he was standing in a lift with Dr. Hargreaves. Please try to relax, David, Dr. Hargreaves said as he pushed a button. I know the unknown can be daunting, but you have to trust me. Nothing can go wrong, I put my faith in that. Run it by me one last time, how does it work? Asked David. You've heard of nanotechnology, swarms of microscopic robots, each one no larger than an atom, will surround you inside the chamber and repair any damaged cells in your body. I thought that kind of thing was only a theory? Said David. Until recently it was, yes, but certain advances have been made in lieu of new discoveries. I'm sorry I can't tell you more. Truth is, we haven't even been told exactly where they came from. But be assured, we've been running these tests for 11 months now and nothing has gone wrong, quite the opposite in fact. So I get in the chamber and these nano things fix me and that's it? Literally that, said Dr. Hargreaves. They are self-powering, self-replicating, and can support all of your body's needs. They can even keep you alive in a crisis. You could suffocate but they'd fill your lungs back up. You could even smash your head in on the wall, David, should you be so inclined, and the clever little things would repair the damage before you even had the slightest headache. All the basics, hunger, sleep, pain, none of those can affect you in that chamber. Theoretically you could live in there for, well, forever. One suppose they can cure boredom too then? David risked a chuckle. Hargreaves laughed in return. Oh no, they can't affect your mind, David, that would be pushing it, don't you think? So they can only work inside this chamber? Dr. Hargreaves's shoulders stiffened. He took off his glasses and wiped them on his tie. Well no, not from what I understand. Why do you ask? So why not just release them into the air if they can cure anything, asked David. It isn't that simple, said Dr. Hargreaves, repositioning his glasses. These things let loose, well, there would be no way of regulating them. Can you imagine everybody alive on Earth at this very moment living forever? It would be quite the nightmare for a number of reasons. No, David, far better they are used for curative purposes in a secure environment. The lift stopped and they stepped out. Dr. Hargreaves led David down a corridor before stopping at a reinforced sealed door. He pressed his thumb on a scanner. Good luck, David. The door opened onto a cavernous hall. In the middle was a transparent chamber. Workstations and computers were laid out in circular rows radiating outward from it. David could see at least 3 lab-coated staff to each station. The walls of the room were lined with tens of pipes, and from the lack of windows David could tell he was far underground. "Mr. Carter," said the strikingly attractive blonde woman in a lab coat approaching him. "Hi," said David, still taking in the room. "My name is Dr. Gustafsson," she said with a slight accent. David couldn't really place it other than somewhere Scandinavian. "Please step inside the chamber when you are ready." He took in a deep breath and walked toward the chamber. Some lights flashed red on the back wall, an alarm accompanied them. "Please carry on, David, this isn't anything for you to worry about," Dr. Hargreaves called over to him from a workstation. David reached the huge metallic door, took an even deeper breath and entered the chamber. Easily a meter thick, it sealed shut behind him. David noticed there was no handle or means of opening the door from the inside. "Start the process," Dr. Gustafsson said, standing in front of the chamber and looking directly at David. Scientists got to work at their workstations. The chamber began to hum with a soft throb. David was amazed and not a little alarmed to feel the pain draining away from his head. Even his knee, injured in a rugby match at school, felt like new again. "This is amazing," he yelled. A phone rang. Dr. Hargreaves looked irritated as he answered it. "Yes? Harry, look, we're very busy right now." "What? Airborne? How on earth did you let that happen?" Dr. Gustafsson looked over at Dr. Hargreaves and arched an eyebrow. "It's research, Tanya. The damn fools have let some kind of virus escape." He listened again at the phone. "Oh my God, it's in the air pipes, Tanya. If it reaches the outside it will poison the atmosphere in seconds." Dr. Hargreaves slammed the phone down. "Get that chamber open now." The last word was punctuated by a bang as one of the pipes along the wall burst and hissed steam. David saw everybody in the room drop to the ground seconds after each other. He looked around his chamber, looking for the air feed, but there wasn't one. There wasn't anything. The entire chamber was smooth. The phone rang a few more times that day, then fell silent. After 6 sleepless days, David was certain that the gas or virus had indeed reached the outside world. He stared out at the room full of dead scientists. Some weeks later the lights went out. He welcomed this. Now he wouldn't have to watch the bodies rot.
Kind of long, but here is one story I have. Last year, mid-January. Minnesota, so it's cold as fuck. And icy. Driving back from Thief River Falls to Red Lake with GF and her cousin at night. Kind of squished together since my truck is a single cab. Must have been maybe -10 degrees, with a wind chill of like -30. Then a fucking snowstorm happens. Strong wind, heavy snow, icy road. This part of the highway sees barely any traffic. Used to this kind of weather, so it's really no biggie. Just chugging along when we see this dude walking. Denim jacket, blue jeans, and black cowboy boots. Stops the truck. GF and her cousin are telling me to just keep going. Their excuse is no room. They were right, but it's too fucking cold to be walking. Make cousin sit on GF's lap. Dude gets in, middle-aged, long hair, fellow heya like us. Says his name is Abraham, but people call him Ahab. Start to talking, says he's going to Red Lake as well. Pretty cool, chill guy. He starts telling us stories of his youth, fishing, hunting. Funny stories really. After about 20 miles or so we near Red Lake, maybe 5 minutes out. Ask him exactly whereabouts in Red Lake he lives. Silence. GF yells in a panicky tone, "Where the fuck is he?" Look over and he's fucking gone. For some reason I slam on the brakes and kind of slide to the shoulder. We are fucking freaking out. He was just right there sitting and talking. Fucking dude just vanished. Later on we drove back home and talked about it. Since us American Indians are the superstitious type, we just presumed it was a spirit. Later talked to GF's grandma about this. She says that happens often. Apparently this dude Abraham died in a rollover in the 70s. People pick him up and he vanishes before he gets to Red Lake.
Be 20 years old. Completely lost in life. Loner. Drive by myself to the nearby town of Yellow Springs to unwind in the wilderness. Beautiful woods. Hippies and Wiccans everywhere. Go to local ice cream parlor. Sitting alone. A girl named Dahlia approaches me. Beautiful white dress, reeks of marijuana. Flowers in her hair. Beautiful. What's your name? I'm Anon. We make small talk and have a lot in common. We walk around the woods. Laugh and flirt all day. She's taking a liking to me. She grabs my hand and leads me into a small cave with a waterfall. Laughing, she pulls out a flask and we drink. We start kissing and I get laid for the first time in a year. She's amazing. It's now getting strikingly dark. The woods are pitch black. She starts telling me about the local witch covens and legends. She pulls out a book from her leather satchel. It's riddled with esoteric markings and sketches. She mentions something about 9 angels. Have no idea what she's talking about. We end up making a shrine of some sort with rocks. I laugh nervously while she says nonsensical words. She coaxes me into staying with her at the cave for the night for fun. We continue to drink all kinds of shit. Have the most amazing sex I've ever had. We cuddle up on the cold cave floor and sleep. She tells me she loves me. I tell her the same. Wake up. She's gone. There's mysterious residue and what seems like blood all over the cave floor and walls. In a panic I yell for her. Wander the woods aimlessly. Nothing. Return to the town. Head to the ice cream parlor searching. They say they've never heard of a Dahlia. Look everywhere. Eventually give up once it got dark. Checked the cave. Empty, nothing on the walls or floor anymore. I'd give anything to see her again. I make a return trip once a week in some sort of feeble hope I'll run into her again. Pick related, it's the cave. Alright guys, I've been holding onto this story for about 3 months now, and I feel like it's time for me to actually get it off my chest since I've had an uptick in nightmares about it. Be me. Go backpacking with my friend and his girlfriend, let's call them Steve and Allie. Steve and I go backpacking all the time, but this is the first time we've gone with his girlfriend. Go to a trail in the middle of nowhere. Supposed to be easy since it's Ollie's first time. First day, hike 6 miles in of the 21-mile trail. Allie complains the whole time about the trail being too long. We arrive at a clearing near a lake and decide to set up. Campsite has a great view of the lake. Just to clarify, Steve and I have fishing rods but no guns or anything. Go fishing with Steve but no luck with any fish. Eat nasty ass freeze-dried food for dinner since we couldn't catch anything. Go to bed early since there was jack shit to do other than fish. Steve and Allie had a tent to themselves and I had a tent on my own. Doze off reading. Wake up at some point in the night. Hear wet footsteps like if you filled boots with water and tried to walk in them. Figure it's Steve or Allie going to take a piss or something. Hear the footsteps slosh into the lake. Unzip tent and look outside since I don't know what the fuck is going on. See something in the lake. Looked like a really shiny rock because the moon is reflecting off of it. Disregard the footsteps and figure all I saw was just a rock and fall asleep. Next morning. Allie and Steve wake up. We set up the stoves and make some shitty breakfast out of freeze-dried eggs, disgusting shit. After awful breakfast Steve and I go fishing again. This time we notice there's a fish on the shore. Brook trout, 8 or 9 inches long, completely headless and only the skin and tail is left. Steve and I both browse/X/ quite frequently so we know to nope. Get back to camp and tell Allie that we should leave soon. Allie throws a bitch fit and refuses to leave since 6 miles was enough. Steve sides with Allie even though something mutilated a fish nearby. Whatever, probably just a raccoon or some shit. Day goes slow as hell. Steve and I fish some more. Allie just sits at camp pouting cause Steve actually wants to have fun. Still didn't catch anything. Odd but whatever. Eat granola bars and shit for lunch. Fish some more. Without hiking the days were boring as fuck. Dinner comes around. Eat some rice and beans for dinner. Go to bed early again. Can't seem to fall asleep, so start sharpening my knife. Once it gets entirely dark, hear footsteps sloshing again. Yell at Steve and Allie to just take a piss before bed. Sloshing stops. Steps head towards camp. Strange but okay. Something brushes into my tent. Oh god, oh fuck. Yell for whatever it is to fuck off, just in case it is Steve or Allie stumbling around or playing a prank. Whatever it is brushes into tent again. Then the steps head towards Steve and Ollie's tent. Snatch my knife and open it. Turn on my headlamp and partially open tent door. See it. Imagine a dolphin if it didn't have a face or fins or a tail. On 4 spindly ass legs with chicken-like feet. Turns towards me and opens its mouth. Just a slit on its face that unhinged and showed some fish-like teeth. Holy fuck. Zip tent back up and bury self in sleeping bag. Lie there with knife in hand. Thing walks directly into the tent. It's gonna tear through the tent. Whip out my knife. Stab the thing straight through the tent. Makes a screech, but like if it was too high-pitched to hear. Almost like a whisper scream, but way too loud to be a whisper. Runs off towards the lake. Loads of splashing this time. Stay up all night with knife in hand. Next morning. Steve and Allie wake up. Ask them if they saw it. Don't know what I'm talking about. Think I'm trying to prank them. Show them the slit in my tent with the reddish blood spattered all around it. Steve freaks out once he sees the blood. Check the lake. At least a dozen gored fish on the shore. Steve and I pack up and basically drag Allie out since she was still being annoying. Go home. Have nightmares about it to this day. Sometimes when it's really quiet I can hear the screech. So, that's what happened to me. It happened in Colorado, in case anybody has any information about whatever I saw. I really want to get to the bottom of this. Also erase my ape tear drawing of what I saw. You probably encountered a water spirit or demon. Did it look anything like this? Thing looks cute. Why'd ya stab it, you spurg? I guess you didn't carry your phone with you either, like all the other Innawoods or Inna Swamp LARPers, so you could take an up-close pic of it.
Great Scott. Scotland it is. Friend and his mate decide to head out to Lenacan, dunno if I spelled it right, for some hiking and general chilling. Raining like hell, but decide screw it, rain never hurt anyone. Get there about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, park, and set off down a trail. About 200 yards in decide to go off trail and go exploring forest. Rain coming down harder, but they've got raincoats, so decide to keep on trucking. 45 minutes to an hour in, start hearing movement following them, but just faintly because of the rain. They figure it might be another hiker or whatever passes for a ranger over there, so ignore it and keep going. Noises start getting closer, but sound as if whatever is making them is creeping slowly. A few chills, but still chalking it up to another person. They eventually reach a less dense part of the forest and stop to chill and take a breather. Noises stop as well. Shrugging all around, more worried about the rain coming down than anything else. His mate says he has to go piss, walks a ways off. He's standing there waiting for a good 8 minutes before his friend walks up and stops a ways away from him. Figures he's just dicking with him, calls him over. Guy starts towards him, and he starts smelling an old copper smell, his description, but chalks it up to imagination. His mate finally makes it over and is just standing there and watching him. Asks if he's okay, friend replies with a grunt. Figures he's just being silent for some reason, so he makes the suggestion of heading back. His friend nods in agreement, and they start back. Tries to make small talk on the hike. His friend only answers in 1 to 2 words, or just grunts. Well fuck you too, dick tickle, pushes him. Friend just kind of falls over all stiff like and looks at him. Usually when he would do that he'd barely move his friend, and he'd always push him back. Starts thinking something weird is going on. Start hiking a bit faster, his friend starts falling back. Figures fuck it, he can find his own way if he gets lost. Pretty soon he loses sight of his mate and decides to hold up for a bit since he can't be that far behind. Waits first a minute, then 5, then 10. Still no sign of his mate. Shit.jpg. Starts backtracking to the last place he saw him. Finds his footprints, but none leading away, forward, or to the sides. My friend starts shitting his pants just a little, but toughs it out because it's his mate and he's getting worried. Start calling out his name hoping for an answer, but doesn't get a response. Next level brown pants begins as he starts jogging back towards the clearing. Gets closer, hears something booking it through the woods towards him. Stops and hides behind a tree to watch. Sees his mate buck-ass naked run out onto the path and look around scared as hell while calling my friend's name. Pokes head out, calls his mate, and starts getting cursed out as he walks over. Asks why in the actual fuck he's in his birthday suit in the middle of a damned rainstorm. His mates retort, "Why the hell did you knock me out and take my fucking clothes?" Staring at each other, friend says he never did that. And if he did, why didn't he have his clothes? Get into a heated argument until they both start hearing movement nearby, along with the copper smell. Rustling nearby, both of them look up in time to see his mate, fully clothed, walk out and simply look at the pair. The doppelmate then smiles, and something about it sets them off and they take off back towards the trail. Whole time they're running, they hear movement on either side of them. Have to take a few breathers in between running because fear and adrenaline can only carry you so far. Noises get closer, along with voices. Finally make it back to their car. By this time it's dark out, so they flip on the lights as they're leaving. Lights catch a set of eyes a little higher off the ground than a human. Makes them both have a brown pants moment as they drive off. Get back into the city and their place. Friend starts looking over his mate and notices scratch marks along his back, as well as bruising around his neck and shoulders. For a while afterwards, his mate would wake up at night screaming for him to cut this cursed thing out of my skin. Ends up having to have mental help over it, freaks out every time that forest is mentioned around him. And that my ex-bros is the Scotland story. As always, it has been my pleasure sharing with you all. Until tomorrow night.
My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me, as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories, on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy or something like that. You just can't believe it. Until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you, maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the Rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life, he wouldn't know what the consensus has taken to naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it or that thing, he called it Skinwalker after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story, the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes. We'd kill 'em for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm, in Ohio. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night, because we needed the money. Sometimes, while we were out, we'd come on a deer, and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Blood, everywhere. Splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they breed with feral dogs. But this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs, or wolves, or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak, or sick, or old, or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, some place it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see that alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat is gone, and then it'll drop dead. It's quick, it's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. There were three bodies. Just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard, either, we just followed the blood. Either that thing bleed a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods, in my life, I've been all over the world, and ain't never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. Heard deer, and fox, and rabbits and raccoons and birds, just scared. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12, or 1 o'clock. Except the fox, and some birds, nothing was supposed to even be awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees just trying to get out of there. We came up on a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for us, but then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us, didn't even notice. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. We should have put it together. That maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks, then. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land. But where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step. Like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds wet nearly tore out my damn throat, once. All that means is that it's quick and hard to hit. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there, sometimes, or drug is looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high. But we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards, and we hear this noise. A screeching kinda sound. It was sort of made up of two different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both, at the same time. We get within 20 yards, and we hear this sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, while someone was swinging water in a bucket, back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down, and whispers. I gotta stay behind him, 'cause we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it's a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that it's just one. He tells me it's probably a single, feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it till it don't move anymore, then slit its throat. And if it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or stab it to get it off him. So he walks up, and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tears off its flesh, and throws what it doesn't nibble it aside. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's pale white. Human looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. And its hands weren't normal, it had long fingers with claws at the end. So we see that, and my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person. So he clears his throat, to try get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I ain't ever heard true silence before that, and not after it. But for 2 seconds, nothing made any noise. Which made it all the louder when it turned around, made this shrill cry, and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind. But it was on him, tears parts of him off. I start shooting it with the .22, point blank, but it barely bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt. But it wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there. It's clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It starts on his torso, ripping off the skin, his tit, then it moves up. It tore off his throat, it tore off his nose, his eyes, it scalped him. Then it started digging in, ripped off the bottom half of his jaw, the little bones and that tube in your neck, then his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow, my dad's knife ends up in this thing's shoulder, and my dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after. And it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones we've been in. I'm heading towards my landlord's house, 'cause it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing, screeching, and moaning. I hear these tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass, it's cracking so loud and often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up and there's my landlord and bunch of his buddies, drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those Godoffel flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad. Most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Asterisk suddenly we hear it screeching. He grabs me, my dad gets thrown on the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, 'cause I think we can still save him, somehow, but my dad had been gone for I ever picked him up. He has to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies, we're all inside, and they're locking doors, and getting guns. The landlord's asking me what happened? What happened? But I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be there, but in 15 minutes. We look outside, and see it walk in front of the fire they'd made. Don't know what it is, one of them says it looks like an ape. Suddenly, something goes through the window. We shoot at it, but ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body, though. Not his head or legs. We start pushing things in front of doors and windows, when we hear something the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent, like it was before. We could hear it move around some, and the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again. Except now it was louder, and it didn't echo and fade out. Because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Cut its hand off, clean. That only pissed it off, though. It started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly the top half of the door is just gone, my ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to that door, what was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off it. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back, not for a long time. When I got back home, I got a job for the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing. But I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him, right away, what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf, or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me, stunned. He tells me that hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove into a tree, died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. Asterisk I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic. Never found him. They said he owed some people some money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had the whole goddamn US Army at my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. FBI was called, they did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they get a few calls about those woods every year, about someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote the Rake onto a napkin. I didn't know what I meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known.
Be middle school me. Be at Christian summer camp, it was one weekend in late September or early October. Be staying in shitty one-room cabins with a bunch of bunk beds. It's just me, my friend, and 3 or 4 younger girls I don't know. Wake up in middle of the night, can see clearly because the younger girls insisted on keeping the lights on. Look over to see friend sitting on one of the bunks parallel to me. Has the creepiest fucking smile on her face. Blank stare, face-splitting grin. Stares straight at me, not even blinking for almost a solid minute. I'm creeped out at this point, but exhausted enough that I don't give a shit. Pull covers over my head and try to ignore it. After at least 10 minutes of her just staring at me, she gets up and walks across the cabin. Stops next to my bunk, I can just feel her staring at me. Finally, I hear her walk away, open the cabin door and leave. Gust of wind comes from outside, blows out pilot light on tiny, shitty gas heater in the cabin. I have to go relight it, since I'm the only one awake, and the cabin will get freezing cold without it. Get out of bunk, reach over to get my lighter out of my bag on the floor, happened to glance into bottom bunk. Friend is dead asleep in there, covered in blankets. No fucking PE. Lock cabin door, cover windows, relight heater. Try to sleep, fail miserably. I went on that trip a couple years in a row, and have quite a few stories, despite only being there for a couple days each time. The other ones aren't quite as solid, but I'll try to remember some. That entire camp in general was creepy as fuck, and things were a bit unsettling all the time. It was located in the Smoky Mountains, so it was super foggy most of the time, earlier than 10 a.m. and later than 8 or 9 p.m. Hanging out with group of friends in field near cabins. It's early evening, and the fog is extra thick. For whatever reason, group of friends disperses and we all start running around in the mist. Friend from first story suddenly comes running back, calling some of us together. Says she saw a certain dog that had hung around the campsite the year before, and that she loved. She followed after him, and ended up at one of the fire pits. There was a campfire going and a group of really cool old people there. The rest of us are curious, but slightly weirded out since the campsite is the only thing for miles, and no one is allowed there except the group who pays for the cabins, at the time, our church. We follow her to the campfire. It had only been a couple minutes since she had left it, but no one was there. Fire was going, though. What? Also, turns out the dog she said she saw had died the previous year. Me and that same friend, who was my best friend at the time, and who I spent most of my time with, as you could tell, didn't get along very well with the younger girls we were bunking with us that year. They were bratty and we were bossy. The two of us had wanted our own cabin room, but they ended up needing the space, so settled for just intimidating and bossing them into doing things the way we wanted to. Now, the cabins themselves were made up of 3 separate rooms. These rooms are what I called cabins in my first post, because it was easier to explain. Each one of them was just the same tiny room with a couple sets of bunk beds and 1 heater. Each room opened straight outside. They had absolutely no insulation and were basically just giant popsicle stick houses. We arrived at night, and immediately went to separate into our bunks, then had to go to sleep. I didn't get to explore anything until the next morning. When I did, I realized our cabin actually had an attic room. There was a staircase wrapping around the side and back leading up to it. See stairs, get excited, rush back to room. Tell friend, some of the younger girls over here. All of us want that room for ourselves. Me, friend, and the 2 less annoying girls follow us up the stairs. Pretty rickety. The door is jammed, and we have to basically kick it open. As soon as we all step in, it feels like I've been hit by a brick wall. Air knocked out of me, can't breathe, fall over and have to grab onto one of the single beds, ceiling too low for bunk beds, to keep my balance. Manage to throw myself out of the bed and stumble/fall out of room. Collapse on little platform at top of stairs. Other girls around me, looking shocked and wheezing. I slam the door shut because wow, fuck that. Once we get our collective breath back, we talk and realize we all felt the same thing. The girl at the back said as soon as we stepped in, we just keeled over. WTF mate. Agree, none of us are ever going back up there. Spooky. Go back and set the place on fire. Honestly, I would go back there if I could, but just explore. Now that I'm older and I'd be going there for spooky experiences, instead of just wanting to camp, I feel like I could explore all sorts of cool stuff in the woods. I have no clue where it'd be, and it's like a 4 to 6 hour drive deep into the mountains. Also, I have no clue what that camp was actually called, and I was banned from that church years ago. But burning a church camp is even a bit much for me, sides, it'd probably then just release the spooky shit and follow me home. YFW, that was a skinwalker. I thought they were called Doppleganger, since skinwalkers seem to be less human. It looked exactly like her except for the expression. But there were a lot of sightings of those types of things. Nothing really outright, but like, you'd see people places they shouldn't be. You'd see someone walking off into the woods, which were kind of all around, but different sections. Might make a really fast map later because I'm awful of trying to describe placements of things, then you'd immediately walk back to the picnic tables and see them in the middle of a card game. You walked the shortest way and never passed them, so how the hell they'd get there so fast? I remember I got yelled at by one of the camp counselors one year, because he supposedly saw me running and hiding behind this hockey shed that was way deep into the woods, and off limits unless you were on one of the teams. I have one more story to tell, but I have to run off for a bit first. I honestly don't know, since I'm new to, but if you think you see evidence to something being fake, I don't care if you point it out. Really, I'm curious as to why it sounds fake. Although I can tell you, this is probably the story I remember most vividly, because it felt like I had been fucking punched in the lung.
B13. Living in Mirandela, a small city in the north of Portugal, PIC related. Starting my 9th grade, decent circle of friends but nonetheless a bit of a loner most of the time. Notice a new girl joined the class. Cute brunette, also seemingly around my age, had a bit of a goth style to her, not to the point of piercings and black nails, but almost always dressed in black. Get paired up with her for a project on the first week and end up chatting, find out we have the same taste in music and movies and inevitably become good friends. She was fatherless, moved into town with her mother recently. Ridiculously intelligent, far more than you'd expect from anyone her age, was even enthusiastic about philosophy and got me into reading Schopenhauer and Sartre, at fucking 13. Was also a loner, didn't hang out with many colleagues other than me, mainly because her long existentialist reflections seemed to bore everyone. Eventually became really close friends, almost platonic lovers. One day she invites me to her house for dinner. Actually a little surprised by how long it took to get invited to her place, given how often she dropped by mine. That evening we meet by the school and she leads the way. We start heading out of town. Half an hour later, we're walking around tall grass fields and dirt paths as night settles in. Can't help but feel a little scared since I don't want to be out in complete darkness. She tells me not to worry and kindly holds my hand. After maybe another half hour, with almost total darkness setting in, we follow a dirt road into a forested area. Fear is really kicking in. About to beg her to go back when she suddenly says we arrived. In front of us is an old, large, and degraded house, heavily obscured by darkness but nonetheless being a striking sight. Not exactly a mansion but still really large, with 3 floors and an old Alfa Romeo parked on the driveway. The door is unlocked, we walk in. She turns on the lights. The interior actually looks decent, lots of old furniture but all of it relatively well taken care of, unlike the torn up exterior implied. My fear turns into curiosity, can't help but feel intrigued by the house and bombard her with questions about it. The best she can say is that her mother got it as heritage from a distant uncle a few years ago and only now felt it would be fitting to move here. After showing me the bottom floor around, proudly displaying her collection of LPS and VHS in the living room, the 80s Philips VHS player was the closest to a modern apparatus in the entire house, and her packed up and thoroughly organized bookshelves in the office, she takes me to the dining room. Asks me to wait there while she goes upstairs to call her mother for dinner. As she leaves the room I contemplate how silent the house is, the only audible sounds being the tremulous treetops in the surrounding woods exposed to the wind and the light hum of an electricity generator probably around the back. Somewhat confused with the whole situation, but far more intrigued by my friend and her mother's eccentric lifestyle than scared by it. In a moment she comes back, tells me her mother is working in the attic and wants us to have dinner there. Now I'm really confused. What is her mother working on the attic and why can't she come down for dinner instead? She explains her mother is a dressmaker and uses the attic as her studio, and as such, spends the entire day there and doesn't want to interrupt her work to go downstairs. Unsatisfactory explanation, but alright. As we get to the upper floor I notice it is in significantly poorer condition than the lower. The walls of the corridor we pass by look slightly dirty and much of the wooden floor covering seems to be torn off. She tells me not to mind that division and explains her mother is still on the process of refurnishing the house. The attic stairs are at the end of the corridor. We climb them up. The attic is an ample but poorly lit space. I am assaulted by a labyrinth of dresses hanged in washing lines spread across the attic, most of them looking ripped and dirty, definitely unlike anything a dressmaker would be producing. A disgusting smell reeked across the room. I can't even properly describe how unpleasant it was. She just calmly makes her way through all the clothes. I try to keep up while covering my face in disgust. "Hey, Mom. Here's the friend I told you about," I hear my friend say. Finally come out at the end of the mess. Regret doing so in the following second as my brain processes what I'm suddenly looking at. Right in front of me is a morbidly decaying corpse, with almost more bone visible than the horrendous rotting flesh, sitting on a chair in front of a small table with a lit candle over it. I can't even properly react to what the fuck is this goddamn thing. Now that we're all together, we can finally have dinner at last, my friend says, seemingly talking to the rotting cadaver before her. Nope. Nope the fuck out. Heart pounding faster than it ever did in my entire life, run through the labyrinth of dresses and quickly head downstairs, rush to the front door of the house as fast as I can. She starts screaming angrily at me. I have no idea of what the fuck she's saying and I don't even take the time to listen to it. Smash through the front door, run away into the surrounding forest with no idea of where to go. The only thing I can make out of all her spontaneous screaming is an almost tear-jerked "Don't leave me" as I rush into the woods. Run through the pitch-black forest for what seemed like torturous hours for my young teenager brain, cry until I'm out of tears to pour out. End up finding a highway. The first driver that passes by and notices me on the side of the road miraculously stops and gives me a ride back into town. Get back home. Parents are surprised to hear me arrive close to midnight but immediately understand something happened as soon as they see me walk into the living room covered in sweat, with my clothes torn up from running through the middle of the woods. Tell them the shit I went through. Needless to say, they were skeptical about such an absurd-sounding story, but nonetheless presumed that, was I telling the truth, I must have been the victim of a prank from her, eventually involving a false corpse dummy or similar. Decide they are going to talk with our teachers to track down her parents and shed some light on her inappropriate attitude. They go to the school the next day to clear it up, far too damn scared to leave my house. And at the same time I was terrified to be in my house given she knew where I lived, invited over the beefiest friend I had at the time under the paranoia of her showing up. Parents came back, told me she was registered into school by her mother during early summer vacations. The school management wasn't able to contact the mother ever since, no phone calls were picked up and, given no one understood where her address was located, all letters were returned to sender. Given how many problems the lack of contact with her mother was causing, they tried calling the girl to clear everything up on that exact moment, but she was missing that day. And so was she missing throughout the rest of the week. And so was she missing throughout the next week. And so was she missing throughout the rest of the month. Final. Was invaded by a mist of self-concern and a legitimate concern for her. On one hand my juvenile couldn't help but imagine she could be up to something, on the other hand I was seriously worried about her and fearing for what could have happened to that poor desperate lunatic. We tried filing a missing person report to the police, but we didn't have her face, hardly knew anyone who spoke to her and still weren't capable of reaching her mother. It eventually ended up being futile when we had nothing but her name to prove she even existed. She was never heard of again. It's been close to an entire decade since that happened. Some years after I moved to the capital, Lisbon, but I still often go north to visit my family and I still know that town like the palm of my hand. And I still have no idea where that damn house of terror is.
Here's one that happened when I was a fresh crossover from Cub Scouts into Boy Scouts. It happened quite a few years ago, so I may not remember it exactly as it happened, but I feel that I remember it fairly well. I've got it typed up in Word before I post it so I can get it out fairly quickly since my internet sucks and a minute can change whether or not I can make a post. So here it goes. Be me. 11 years old. Fresh off my mum's teat and thrown into Boy Scouts. It's typical for troops to go on a camping trip soon after they get crossovers to get them adjusted to being a Boy Scout as opposed to a Cub Scout. Unless you were both, you won't understand what a culture shock it can be. My troop is a democracy, we voted on where to go. The older scouts were all assholes, we didn't know this at the time, and they persuaded us to vote for Bumfuckistan in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. We do. Fast forward to the camping trip. All geared up, excited as fuck to be going camping like a man as I thought it was back then. None of the older guys show up since they felt it would be babysitting. Only out Scoutmaster, Assistant Scoutmaster, and 7 crossovers. Scoutmasters are pissed but not at us, as they kept reassuring us. We go. Get there at about 11 p.m. Latest I've stayed up with other people. Excitement is palpable. We set up. Hard as fuck to set up a tent by myself in the dark for the first time. When we're done we eat a small dinner and go to bed. Wake up in the middle of the night, don't know when, this is before everyone had cell phones, and I didn't have a watch. Don't know why, so I just try to go back to sleep. Laying there for a while when I hear something weird. Sounds like a kid laughing. Figure it's one of my friends staying up telling jokes with someone. It will come in parts. Next morning. Walk out of tent and see everyone already gathered around the campfire. Everyone just sort of looks at me. Figure I was snoring or something. Tell me that they thought I was laughing all last night and that I need to not do it tonight. Tell them it wasn't me and that I heard it too. They don't believe me. My fragile 11-year-old feelings were hurt all day. We did all kinds of fun stuff and I was being a bitch because everyone was mad at me that morning. I still regret how I acted to this day. That night when we're about to go to bed again, we smell something awful coming from all around us. Scoutmaster is half Indian and an avid outdoorsman. Tells us it's probably just some dead animal dropped by a bird flying overhead and that it happens all the time. Then he goes and sits in his truck for the rest of the night. I figured it was to get away from the smell. The smell goes away shortly thereafter and we all go to bed, Scoutmaster still in his truck just looking around the campsite. Before I fall asleep I hear one of my friends ask to come in my tent because his has a giant hole in it. He just got his totem chip and was being a smart ass with his knife. I say yes since he's my friend and I wasn't a dick like I am now. He brings all his shit in, I mean all of it, his bag, his clothes, his tent that he packed up, fucking everything. We go to bed. He wakes me up sometime in the middle of the night. Tells me to stop laughing. I hear it. Tell him it's not me and it dawns on him that I'm talking during the laughter. We shit ourselves. We're terrified, the most terrified I've ever been and hopefully ever will be. Which sounds stupid, looking back I would figure it's someone else laughing, but I was 11 so give me a break. After a few minutes of faint laughter we smell the smell again. The laughter starts getting louder. One kid. We called him Tank when we were older, one instance of his badassery. We were hiking in the Rockies one summer and a fucking brown bear crossed our path. He didn't follow the instructions of what to do if we encountered one, instead he fucking runs at it. And it roars and runs off. I shit you not, he was fucking nuts, so we called him Tank, since he was a fat bastard and not afraid of anything it seemed. We were 15, so whatever. One kid, later known as Tank, yells at the laughter. Stop laughing, I am trying to sleep. Truck door slams shut and we hear a shotgun racking. The laughter stops and the smell shortly thereafter goes away. Scoutmaster tells us to go back to sleep and we do, don't question what just happened since we were tired. Wake up next morning and the Scoutmasters were sitting in the truck talking. We make breakfast and get ready to pack up since it was Sunday. When we're done the Scoutmasters come out and tell us that we're leaving. We put all our shit in the back of truck and hop in Scoutmaster's truck and Assistant Scoutmaster's van. We head out. Driving for about an hour. We're lost. Scoutmaster gets stuck, Ford. Assistant pulls him out with his van. When the truck finally gets loose the van lurches forward and slides down a small hill that the trail was on. Gets stuck. Well fuck. Gif. Can't get it out. It's already 1 p.m. and Scoutmasters are starting to get mad. No cell phones. Our parents and about a dozen other people know where we are, so they'll send help soon. Stay with the vehicles to be found easier. Set up camp in the trail right next to Scoutmaster's truck. No lunch and a small dinner, only brought food for 2 days and this was leftovers. Go to sleep early to get up early and try and get the van loose. Wake up in the night to someone yelling, "Stop laughing, I am trying to sleep." It doesn't sound like tank. And no one is laughing. Stop laughing, I am trying to sleep. Sounds like tank, no one is laughing. Piss myself, literally. Scoutmaster gets out of his truck again and shoots around off I don't know where. Realize that the smell is back, worse than ever. Hear people running to my left, not on the trail, in the forest on one side of the trail. Scoutmaster yells at us to all get up and that we're moving. We all get up. Don't even pack. We just start moving down the trail towards the main road about 10 miles away. It's literally so dark in this forest I can't even see my own feet as I'm walking. Scoutmaster on point with his shotgun. Assistant Scoutmaster in the rear with a pistol I didn't know he had, 1911 as I later found out. We walk for what seems like hours in total silence. I almost fall asleep walking, it can happen believe it or not, but the guy behind me tapped my shoulder and stopped me from sleeping. We're all walking in a single file line down the trail in pitch blackness except for my Scoutmaster's mawlight. Its beam scanning the tree line on either side of the trail. We start to smell that smell again after walking for some time. Scoutmaster picks up pace. It's getting worse. Scoutmaster is looking into the tree line frantically right now. The smell is so bad it made my eyes water. Get up, we're leaving. Sounds just like Scoutmaster but from my left rear, Scoutmaster is in front of me. He shines light where the voice came from and we see nothing. Scoutmasters circle us and get on either side of us, both facing the tree line on either side. The smell is so bad right now I can't think about anything else. Scoutmaster racks another round in the shotgun to replace the one he shot in camp earlier. We just stand there for a while. The smell starts to go away. We start to move again. We're all pretty shaken up at this point since we don't know what's going on but something is obviously very wrong. Scoutmaster teaches us the Scout Vespers. We start to sing it to calm us down. Singing for like an hour. Softly falls the light of day, as our campfire fades away. Silently a scout should ask, have I done my daily task? Have I kept my honor bright, can I get some sleep tonight? Have I done and have I dared, everything to be prepared? Smell is completely gone at this point and we're feeling better. Tired as fuck right now. One kid passes out. Another passes out while we're trying to wake up the first one. A third. Scoutmasters can't carry 3 kids out of the forest, both were pretty small in stature, not much bigger than we were at that point. We stay there and try to bring the kids too. Smell comes back. Laughing. The laughing stops when Scoutmaster racks his shotgun, he kept doing that, and then reloading the shell that ejected. The smell was still there but it was silent. Then softly falls the light of day, as out campfire fades away. It's coming from the opposite side as the laughter, we didn't see anything cross the trail. Shit.png. The motherfucker was singing Scout Vespers. Assistant Scoutmaster shoots a few rounds in the direction of the singing. Singing stops and smell dissipates shortly thereafter. Fuck this. Each Scoutmaster picks up one kid and fireman carries him. The first kid woke up and was coherent. We book it down the trail. Running for a while and the sun is up enough to see. Get to the road and a truck passes us. We're a group of kids wearing Boy Scout uniforms with 2 adults carrying kids. He slams on his brakes and backs up. Tells us to get in. We all jump in the back with the passed out kids in the cabin with the assistant Scoutmaster. We get to a gas station and everyone gets out, the assistant scoutmaster makes a call on the payphone. Scoutmaster buys us all breakfast from the sandwich shop in the gas station. Some of us sleep. I stay up and listen to what the adults are saying. Last part probably. Guy that picked us up and the gas station owner are talking frantically to the scoutmasters. I don't hear everything since they're talking quietly, so we don't hear. They notice I'm listening and go inside. There's a hole in the window, looks like someone shot it, but I don't know, and I stick my ear to it. They're talking normally now. Truck driver talks about he works on a farm a few miles away and was making a run to the station to fill up a few canisters for a tractor. Gas station owner says he lives in town about 30 minutes away. He used to live next to the gas station, but the house got destroyed in a storm. Both are very familiar with the area. When the scoutmasters tell them all that happened, both guys just get serious looks on their faces. I shit you not, the truck driver said, so there's more than one, and the owner nodded in agreement. Scoutmasters ask more than one what? The truck driver says he doesn't know. Owner dodges the question. Truck driver says it kills cattle on the farm every few months. The carnage looks like something out of a horror movie. He's never seen it, but he's smelled it and heard it. My hair is standing on end at this point and I get shivers down my back. Next one is the last one. Okay, last part, not green texted. We waited at the gas station until a tow truck came and towed back the van. We all got in and left. Scoutmaster went back with farmer and drove his truck out and met us back home. We never talk about it anymore. I don't know any of the kids I went camping with anymore. Tank got really depressed a few years ago. He's the only one who would talk about it because little bitches couldn't even face us like men, but we all know he had nightmares about it for years. He killed himself last year. According to his mother, he wasn't able to sleep, which led to his depression. That's all I've got. We never went back there. Half of the kids who crossed over left the troop. The other half were my best friends throughout the rest of middle school and high school. We all went our separate ways after scouts and graduation, except Tank and I. I don't normally comment on X, just lurk most of the time, but I saw this thread and figured why the fuck not, I'll post. I had 3 different events, might have to post them separately, might not post all of them if I get tired of typing. I suck at green text BTW, so I'll just type it out. The first event I had was when I was a kiddo, although I didn't realize it until I was older, but my parents and school teachers did. Before September 11th I was always, drawing cities, and would put the Twin Towers in them burning. Although I was like 4 at the time and I had never even seen them or heard of them, I did this in my agenda notebook, on the desk, on paper at home, all the time. Nobody thought anything of it until 9/11 happened, and then everyone was very quiet around me. They would try to be really nice to me. They wanted me to draw something other than burning towers. They never told me what, they just told me to draw whatever I wanted. Don't really remember much beyond that though. Fast forward about a decade and a half, I find my old agenda notebooks in the closet, and see 9/11 scribbles all over them from time periods far before September 11th. I finally went and asked my parents about it and they were extremely squirmy on the subject. But finally they had told me that I was drawing all of this before September 11th and that they were hoping I would just forget. They had told me that my mother apparently predicted a bunch of plane crashes between the 60s and the 80s to excruciating detail, down to the exact locations they would hit, although she lost this ability when I was born. Apparently my grandmother and my great-grandmother had the same ability to varying other degrees. It's really made me question a lot of shit ever since though, to the extent that I seriously worry about my own thoughts. Story number 2. Significantly after this, but before rediscovering this weird life event of mine, I had another incident take place. I had the day off and had gone to sleep, although once I had awoken in my dream I didn't realize I was asleep. I lived out day after day, week after week, month after month in this dream that I didn't even know was a dream. However, it was not a good one. Eventually at some distant future point the space station was deorbited. I do not know if this was intentional, or if it was normal orbital decay, or if it was even the ISS and not just one of the Chinese stations, however. Shortly after this there was a limited nuclear exchange in which 36 nuclear weapons were detonated in the Texas Gulf region. I am unsure what happened with the rest of the country though, but I imagine it was catastrophic. Services never came back. Shortly after this came airstrikes, no idea from who. It honestly looked like some variant of Su-30 Russian plane, only a few however before those two eventually stopped. About a week after this it got horrific. There were a bunch of anvil clouds that seemingly developed out of nowhere and large spacecraft were seen in them, not emerging Independence Day style, but as if the cloud itself was some kind of portal and these ships were sort of halfway loitering halfway in / out of the portal. The ships were large angular brick-shaped, but had no real texture to speak of. They were a sort of solid stone / slate gray, and just sat there. We never saw anything come out of them. All we remembered were screams, from everywhere, and these monsters that would peel the skin from children and parents and wear their skin, and they were capable of perfectly imitating the voices of the people whose skin they took. They did this to lure people out of their hiding spots and take them. Killing yourself to escape them would not work. They could reanimate the dead. Part 2 after this. Part 2 of the last story. If you killed yourself to escape, it wouldn't work. They could reanimate the dead and keep you on some sort of life support for the sake of experimentation. I don't know why or how, but somehow I knew that if they took you that you were theirs forever. There was no escape. However, they also had large facilities on the earth. They looked like normal warehouses, but the ones who wore people's skin were inside these. They would liquefy humans in here and keep them in devices that looked similar to dryers, and each liquefied human was kept in their own. And we had a hand scanner we could use to find where our person's remains were so we could steal them so that they couldn't reconstitute their remains and make them suffer. Somehow we could reconstruct the entire person back to what they were with this liquid. However, the ones who wore people's skin had these large pools ringed with symbols that looked similar to Zoroastrian dogmas. I don't know the spelling, and they would fill these pools with the people's liquefied remains and bathe in them, and their children would bathe in them and drink them. And they would try throwing people in, and if you fell in then you were one of them. This went on until most of the human race had been wiped out. I do not remember most of what happened as this was a single dream spanning almost 72 years. Eventually though their spacecraft were destroyed. Most of the life on Earth was destroyed. It had become a large desert. I remember there were still alligators though, and whatever had transpired had killed the sun. It was slowly dying, as if perhaps they had siphoned energy from it to escape. I don't know if anyone intervened on our behalf, but I think someone did. But I remember I was walking with a girl in a blue dress. She was my wife. I don't have a wife in real life, mind you. Part 3 after this. But anyways, me and my wife in the blue dress were walking down the road. There was a small ditch on the left side, with a few alligators in it, and a line of trees on the other following the ditch. We were walking home, and there were bits of these spacecraft everywhere. The sun looked like it was setting, but it wasn't, damaged or something as I stated in previous post, but we finally got home. It was getting close to nighttime. I then remember her whispering to me very quietly, "We need to be quiet and turn all the lights off or they'll see us." We did this, and saw lights on the horizon slowly blinking out one by one by one. I don't know if the lights were really close enough or not, but I could swear I heard distant screaming, like there was a reason their lights were going off, as though even in our victory we were still being hunted. I do not know what our enemy was, we all just called it them. I woke up after this, and realized I had been asleep for almost 14 hours, normally I sleep 7.5, and that this 72 years of mine had all somehow been a complex fabrication of my imagination. However, every single event leading up to this has happened so far again, every single last one, and I fear that either I am once again in the long dream, or that it has become reality this time, and we are about to see tribulation. All of this sounds ridiculous to believe whatsoever, I know. I still have 2 other stories about similar events to this if you're interested. Russian invasion of Crimea. Iraq falling apart and returning to a fractured state, Syrian intervention. The next things to come along are that the rest of the Middle East falls apart, not just what we're already seeing but Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Iran, pretty much everything except Israel, eventually a space station, no idea which one or when/how, will deorbit. A war between Russia and the US is going to kick off, it's inevitable. Russia is going to invade up through Mexico. The red line is how far into the US they end up advancing due to aid from the native Mexican population initiating an insurrection due to increased nationalism. And a weak quasi-breakup of the US following a civil war. The green circle is a flashpoint where Russia didn't invade at first, they stayed on one side of the ship channel until finally attempting to cross it, and that's when things go nuclear. 36 nuclear weapons are exchanged in and around the green circle. I have no idea how many are exchanged elsewhere, as that is the last time we have internet or TV ever again. Many other electronic devices and vehicles still worked, however, mostly older ones though, and for some reason, as I said, the handheld scanner for finding humans worked. Russia does a few more strikes with aircraft that I assume were hardened against the initial nuclear exchange, although they very quickly stopped, as I imagine they likely ran out of fuel or some such other reason. Very soon after this is when the ships arrived. They are able to reanimate the bodies if they're fresh. I don't think they can if they've been dead for a long time or in the ground for a while, but I think there's about a 1-week window that they still can. I wouldn't advise killing yourself though, obviously. I'm not sure what they looked like. They were always wearing human skin when I saw them, although it was sort of loose, and they would walk upright like humans, but they could run faster than any human, and even faster on all fours. Even the child-sized ones were stronger than any human. There was no way to kill any of them either. I don't mean that figuratively, I mean literally. In my entire time I had not seen a single one die. They had a weird sort of glow to them though, like you could see under the skin where they had glowing machinery or augmented body parts or something that were part of them. And some of them, the heads didn't look right because you could see the human skin on them, but you could see 4 or 5 glowing white eyes under the skin. The only way to survive was either run, which wasn't advisable because they will catch you on foot, or hide until they leave. But even that wasn't too good because they were extremely quiet and would just sit there and wait outside of doors silently until people opened them, and then they would take them. The only people who really survived were the ones who had already gotten to the middle of nowhere when the nuclear war went down, or those who had basically given away their own as bait to lure them away while they escaped. I would not doubt for a second that by the end of the 72 years there were probably only a few 100,000 people left on Earth, if even that many. My scanner isn't working, so I can't upload anything I've drawn about this stuff without it being shit tier quality, but from what I can tell, their technology is compartmentalized, as in they have several tiers/hierarchies of technology. Whether this is due to them being an amalgam of civilizations or not is unknown to me, but I think it might be a similar reason to just not wanting us to get their technology. I'm pretty sure the hand scanner was theirs, but I was based off existing human technology. Or maybe human technology was based off of it? I'm not sure. Most of their other stuff was absolutely useless to us though. There was no way for us to use it. Somehow with these portals being open they were siphoning some kind of energy that powered the ships, completely different from electricity, although I'm not sure they even needed the portals tbqh. Without this energy the pieces of their ships were literally nothing more than useless common metals/alloys. They somehow underwent some kind of rapid breakdown without the energy source. I don't remember how the portals closed or how the ships were destroyed. I was in the middle of nowhere at the time. I'm almost certain, 90% anyways, that there's some kind of scavenger civilization. They wait for civilizations to wipe themselves out, and then it's like it's some kind of cosmic law that for the most part everyone is allowed to pick through the remains. Which I think is what happened after the nuclear war, and I think someone didn't like this and kicked them out, but not before they damaged the sun as a final fuck you to humans and whoever helped them. As I said though, it was not fun. There was something left behind. I don't think it was them though. I think it was something else. It was something in the long dark that would eat people. They didn't glow and I never saw them. I just knew not to ever show any light at night time ever. And when it was night we slept underground. Part 2 in a second. Part 2. We slept underground under the house in case the things in the dark came inside and found us. I think they were little more than animals, maybe something they left behind, but I don't know. I don't even know if the long dark was permanent or not, as that's when the dream ended. The sun was dying. It was also possible in addition to this that it was nighttime, as it was that the sun had died or that they had moved an object in front of it to obfuscate the earth. Or maybe it was residual atmospheric debris from the nuclear war and everything else that had happened. I know for a fact that something did happen to the sun though, so it could have been a compounded mixture of these events. In addition to this, I remember one time during this dream, a different occasion, where I had gotten onto one of the ships somehow, and I saw what happened to the people who were taken. They were intubated in their back and varying body parts, not too much unlike the Matrix. However, there were far more cables and other mechanisms that I have no idea what they were, but if you died then these devices let them bring you back, and most of the people attached to these devices were spliced open with organs showing or missing entire pieces of their bodies. There were a few people who weren't much more than heads with gore sticking out of the bottom, but they were still intubated and kept alive and mostly just screamed. The inside of the ships was the same slate grayish color, but there were colors made of energy. Perhaps as electronic interface panels of some sort, but probably not. It wasn't pretty colors though, just varying shades of white/yellow/light bluish. It was very basic too, none of that H.R. Geiger alien style. The ships were very utilitarian in design on the inside. Everything served a purpose and only that purpose, no decoration whatsoever. In addition to all of this, I say Mexican uprising. What I mean is that the Mexico aligned with Russia and most of South America/Central America, so this coupled with Russia allowed for a fairly robust invasion. The US had been weakened substantially already, as I said, due to the internal civil war. Whether it is related to this election or not though I'm not sure. Under normal circumstances I doubt they would be able to pull off an invasion though, so we must have been fairly weakened. I know the White House and the Capitol was taken by the People's Revolutionary Force, shit name, but that's what they called themselves or had grown to be called anyways, so for the most part the government had already been decapitated before the invasion. In addition to all of this, again, the invasion and subsequent nuclear exchange had all come about very quickly. I was out in the backyard with my mother putting white Christmas lights in the backyard as patio lights. I don't think it was near Christmas though. We had literally walked inside and my dad was laying on the floor watching TV and had said, well, I guess we just started World War III, and not 20 seconds after that the first flash went off outside near what would probably be the Pasadena area of Houston. Followed by the large area of petrochemical plants on the other side of the ship channel. They looked to be fairly low yield, 10-20 KT range, as though they were specifically trying to target smaller areas, but I don't know. We got the shockwave where I was and our windows were blown out, but the building was still intact with little damage. I had never said they were glowing green under their skin. I don't think I did. They were glowing the same as their ships, as a sort of white/yellowy bluish color. I don't have a word for it, but it wasn't an earth color. I speculate on the machinery, but there were bits and pieces poking out through the skin and holes in the skin due to some people's skin going necrotic. The machinery under the skin looked like a very similar stone gray as their ships. The skin was pretty contorted on their bodies in some cases though, as I said, multiple eyes covered by the skin sometimes, or others where the skin didn't exactly fit them right. They still had mouths though, but I don't think it was for eating. I think perhaps it helped them grab onto people or for the express purpose of killing or subduing them. I don't even know if they were technically alive or if they themselves were just biological machines. Some of them really seemed like they wanted the skin as trophies more than anything though. They collected it and some of them were wearing multiple layers, and as I said, I have no idea whatsoever as to why they would liquefy the people and put them in the dryer machines in the warehouses. Surely they had some purpose, but I don't know. It could just be as simple as storage or perhaps some religious purpose of theirs. They seemed to have some interest in Zoroastrianism, as I said. I don't know how even a breakaway civilization could fight them though. From my understanding they were possibly the first intelligent species ever throughout all dimensions, or one of the first anyways. I can't imagine anyone from this planet could even fathom a way to fight them. It would have had to have been someone else out there on their technological level. I have no idea what Skinwalkers is. Can you give me a link? Part 2 after. The ship in that video looks nothing like their ships. Sorry, they didn't have digital displays like that. It was kind of like some strange form of hard light formed out of energy or something. But it had solid pieces that it looked like if the hard light turned off then they would fall to the floor, but they didn't. They sat there in a static position. The ship had no windows whatsoever either, and any writing anywhere was in the same light/energy as the consoles. The best I can describe it is that the ship was as much an amalgam of a mash of technologies as one can imagine. There was stuff that just simply looked out of place for something like that, rudimentary tools along with energy. Along with patchwork on the inside of the ships as though they were extremely old, but at the same time they looked like they were made of metal and stone at the same time, if that makes any sense. I used to work in the plants and they could actually survive a low-yield blast fairly well, as they're built to survive the explosions of nearby units/plants already. You might have to rebuild the control room and change butterfly valves and anything else with an electronic sensor, but most of the stuff out there that could be that sensitive is buried. My guess is it could only take about a month or two to get it back online, assuming you had workers and assuming the plant itself wasn't hit too close. That's pretty similar, yet except they don't drool, although it's possible what you said that they're controlled by them as scouts then. Perhaps some kind of brain implant or some such other similar machination, so I wouldn't doubt it. This is my best paint shop rendition of it, but it doesn't do it justice whatsoever. The things were massive and intimidating, like just up there in the sky, solid and unmoving. Never once did we see one move, and most of the time you only see like half of it. The other half is usually obscured by fog. I can't make it look like it in paint, but the surface is pretty much completely seamless, but it can open up. The inside looks like a mix of the metallic stone and the energy when it does. I never saw anything come out though, but they would leave these things that looked like giant stone caskets on the ground below the holes in the ships, and the things would crawl out of them. What? I mean them as in the eyes, not Juden.